a connector. As such, how I show up in the world has always been impacted by my desire to bring people, interests, and of course, communities together for the common good. Like so many of us, I have a deep desire to see us cluster our gifts and assets together, a star-struck constellation of freedom and justice for all. Well, newsflash, there's not going to be a big bang that changes the world. I know, I was disappointed too. But the good news is that the world change that we desire requires a movement, and everything we need to create the movement we have been seeking lives inside of us. With just 7 small pivots in how we live, we can create the constellation for change we so deeply desire. We should begin at the root of all things debilitating: fear. It often squelches our capacity to accomplish anything. And so often we're told, just be fearless, as if it were that easy. Realistically, neither allowing our fear to stagnate us, nor just proclaiming the relinquishing of it is really helpful. But if we can acknowledge our fear, to name it without allowing it to rule over us, we can move forward with our achievements, even in the face of our fears. Today is not about overcoming our fears, but rather it's about being willing to just do it afraid. Wherever you are, whatever your it is, don't wait until the fear passes. Let it be the catalyst, even in the midst of fear. Let the fear be the fuel that propels you toward the freedom and liberation that lies just on the other side of our doing it, whatever your it may be. Often, in response to fear, we create buffers, barriers between ourselves and that which we fear. Sometimes we harbor our feelings. Sometimes we disassociate ourselves from people who are not like us. Sometimes, quite literally, we build walls. But what would our lives look like if we made the pivot from building barriers to building bridges, connectors between us and our feelings, between us and strangers, between us and our neighbors? Keep in mind that the bridges that put us in proximity to discomfort also bring us closer to moments of sharing and learning and growing. We need to build more bridges, and we need to do it together. And this idea of togetherness is another pivot to consider. When all of the messaging we receive in the world is about taking care of ourselves, becoming self-sustaining, it seems almost counterintuitive to concern one's own self with another. But in truth, all any of us really want is to be seen and named and known and understood by others. This is a universal desire. And if each one of us pivoted from self-centeredness to solidarity, we could witness the beauty and experience the endurance that comes when we work collaboratively. And I don't mean the cheapened form of simply sitting at the same time in the same place while we're pushing and shoving our own agendas onto a crowded table or a crowded platform. I mean really experiencing the value of what it feels like to hold our own plans loosely enough to consider another's ideas, and giving ourselves permission to be genuinely curious and earnestly wondering about new and fresh perspectives, not our own. This is the joy of collaboration. And in reality, collaboration and working together is emotionally healthy, as much of the hurt and pain we're experiencing is coming as a result of sheer loneliness. But taking the risk to be vulnerable in intersectional relationships that foster true solidarity, allowing yourself to be seen, allowing yourself to be named and known and understood while making room for others to experience the same, can also bring about a pivot from the hurt and pain of loneliness to the hope that is rooted in being in genuine community with others. Hope emerges when communities work together to overcome the hurt in the world. I hope you're starting to see how each pivot you make builds on the one before it, multiplying individual and communal transformation. When we embark on transformation of this type together, we create the accountability that enhances sustainable change. One of the biggest challenges to our collective forward progress is our own consumptive nature. Our lives and everything in them is bound by consumption. Consumption of food, culture, consumptive religious doctrine, even consumption of each other's trauma. These are all elements that we consume and often even critique while consuming, when in reality, if we could relinquish some of our consumptive habits, we could exchange that energy to become creators of the beauty and the innovation we hope to see in the world. Surrounding ourselves with artists and activists and organizers, those who are constantly creating and innovating and hacking into new and beautiful ways of being, is a key element in moving from consuming to creating. And it is through innovation and creativity that we can bring forth the changes necessary for all of us to live well. We often practice charity as a means by which to share goodness, so that we might all live well. And while charity has a noble and honorable practice in attempting to transform the community, it often comes with the stigma of labeling people as needy or poor. In reality, all of us are in need or experiencing poverty of something. Poverty of heart, poverty of mind, poverty of spirit or body. There is so much more than just fiscal poverty to be considered. When we begin to recognize that we all show up on the spectrum of poverty, depending on the circumstances in question, that we all have gaps between where we really want to be and where we actually are in our lives, then we can pivot from practicing one-directional giving to the mutual relationships that result in the kind of change that deeply impacts our lives together. If we each made these pivots in our lives as a community, we would have the movement we've been hoping to see, no big bang needed. Turning away from just maintaining stuff and managing life and dealing with the day-to-day, and moving towards collective, creative culture making would result in the world that we hope for, the one that we so deeply desire, one full of gifts and talents. a collective of gifts and talents comprising a cosmos of equity and abundance for all of us. These 7 pivots are what stand between the ideal world of which we dream and the actual one in which we live. Howard Thurman once said, "There is something in every single one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have. And if you can't hear it, you will all of your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else gets to pull." If each of us made these small changes in how we show up in the world, these strings would become the ties that bind us together, connecting us to a system of freedom and liberation that we so deeply desire. So let us courageously pursue this constellation of liberty and relinquish those puppet strings of disingenuity, because our authentic selves are waiting. Let's not let us down. Thank you.